I'll get into in 2009 is when I started Green Smoke Room. It was an online head shop selling paraphernalia. Very quickly, I had it going and I was learning a lot about the cannabis community and the e-commerce industry at the time. I was 18, just a passion project, and it was like 2010, 2011, we started getting inundated with emails about seeds. So started looking into the seed industry and internationally how it worked, and I saw, the Europeans had the Souvenir Act where they could sell their seeds as a souvenir. So I went online and I just purchased some seeds from one of the international seed banks, and they shipped it to me, and we started selling them online. I was very naive at the time. I kind of just looked at the international law, not the local law. It was 2012. I started looking into the actual law in South Africa, saw that we couldn't breed genetics here, couldn't actually sell seeds. The seeds were still are defined as cannabis. So we spoke to our lawyers and found, ways around of how we could actually produce our seeds and then ship them worldwide. So that led us down.
Is that through the same souvenir model that you do that?
Yes, but not in South Africa. So in South Africa, we don't have a Souvenir Act. There's no act that says that you can hold any seed for to preserve the genetic strain. They have it in Europe. So what we do is we actually have a license in California. That's where we do all our breeding. We got that in 2013. I've always really wished we could breed in South Africa. It's always killed me that we've had to, we call ourselves an African seed bank who breed and develop genetics in America. We wish we could breed them here, but purely for legality purposes, we can't breed them here. We have been looking, of course, since 2018, since SAPRA have been releasing licenses, since the judgment that you can grow at home, we have been looking at new avenues to move our facility to South Africa. So throughout the years, we have Supplier South Africa, but it hasn't been, our business. What we did is I registered our company overseas in Europe, in a country. We registered in Spain, where you can legally sell seeds as a souvenir. So that's where we hold and dispatch all our seeds from. We ship worldwide from there under the international law that the buyer needs to know that in their country can they be receiving the product legally. So we are fighting to change this. In Green Smoke Room South Africa, our offices here, we run the back office basically. We got the marketing end here, we do our web development here. We project plan here to make sure we know what genetics we're producing, and we do our research out of here, but we would like to move the full operation to South Africa.
Do I understand you correctly when you say, have you registered some South African land races in California and you'd like to bring them back here, or you're not doing anything in South African land races yet?
So all our genetics are bred, that's how the Green Smoke Room started. Our first 35 genetics we bred were all bred using African genetics. We got a license 2013. We only released our first genetics around end of 2016. It took a long time to do Pheno hunting, choose the right genetics, and then of course the breeding of African landrace strains with American genetics was not as easy as we thought it would be. So we breed it out in America, but we haven't registered them. The registration process around the world, I haven't found, to my knowledge, in the research I've done, we haven't found a governing party that lets you register medicinal cannabis. We have found a few governing parties around the world that have registered hemp varieties, which, some guys have pushed it to where they've registered a high CBD strain, which is medicinal, but it's still registered as a hemp variety. So, and there's not, I mean, to my knowledge, to date, I think there's like 6 that's been registered. And it's a long process. The European seed trade, they have the process to register hemp varieties, but last time I checked, it was a 2 to 3 year process. And if you had to do the proper research and everything behind it, it's a 6 to 7 year process. So yeah, jumping into that game it's registering the seeds is, it's a long process, and guys are producing new genetics quicker than people are registering them. So often I like to even look at if you want to take strawberries, blueberries, tobacco, these industries, a lot of the breeders don't actually register the genetics anymore. They've got a name for themselves. Their clientele know what they produce. They have registered genetics in the past, but it's come to a point now where they're producing new genetics on a yearly basis, and it's taking 3 to 5 years to get them registered. So it's the registration process is just too slow, and that's kind of what we're hoping that DORAD, especially in South Africa, come to the party and create a separate avenue to register cannabis genetics. But from the conversations I've had with them, they have a good process there for it, but they're waiting for the Justice Department to actually change the act and take away seeds out of the definition of cannabis.
You made the point in Parliament, I think, that it actually is as easy as just changing wording, really. It doesn't require new laws or anything like that. And so it could, South Africa does have the potential capacity then to not stand in the 7-year queue to get a thing going.
So just I'll back on that. We still have that. If you're trying to register a new variety, chili variety, strawberry variety, it is quite a long, tedious process, 3 to 4 years. From the research I've done, there are rare cases. I've spoken to guys who get it done within 6 months. But on the general scheme of things, I have seen it takes 2 to 3 years for guys to register new genetics. Yeah.
And how does an institution create a seed bank with local land races? What are the markers? What's the IP? Is it a kind of molecular structure, or how does it work?
I could actually share. I have to look into my computer a little bit. I can share a document on. I've got the chili document on how you register chili varieties in South Africa. So DORAD do have these processes for different varieties, depending if it's a fruit, an edible, or decorative plant, and then going into, if it's a capsicum or what the variety is, you can email them and they do send you a form that states on how you register your genetic through the Plant Breeder Rights Act. A lot of it, 80% of it is your phenotype, the look of the plant. So a lot of it comes down to you have to take photos of it, you got to measure it, you got to, like with the chilies, they actually show you, so far, the last I saw was like 13 different diagrams of chilies, and you have to tick like which one your chili is closest to. The coloration of the plant you put in there, then it goes, they don't have it on the form here, but you can also send it for Scoville testing, for the actual heat testing, so that will come down to more the DNA in the plant. Today we do have CRISPR. You can check the actual DNA structures of the plants. So there's been a big push to register genetics through CRISPR or CRISPR-Cas. It's a technology. But yeah, so far, we have, it's about for chilies and other varieties, I've seen 8 to 12 page document. Like I said, majority of it is the look of the plant, the weight of the yield, the coloration, and then it'll come down to, there's a very small part for actual testing, where you send the product for end testing.
So presumably any kind of cannabis thing would have to go into a lot more detail about THC or CBD potency levels, etc., etc. So
most definitely.
Yeah. So
but that also leads us to another little issue with regards to the testing. your testing process worldwide. We don't have a standard calibration method to test cannabinoids. So, I mean, in South Africa, I know of 2 facilities that are licensed that can do cannabinoid testing, and both of them, if you send the same product to both of them, you can get different results. As well as, I mean, in California, we've seen this for the last 7 years. You could send it to the same product to 10 different facilities and get 10 different results. And it all comes down to the machine they're using, the calibration of the machine. So until we have this standardized calibration and a standard machine, that I hope government can kind of, start supporting, that you get the governments around the world to set up a department that's been approved, or, a private sector that's being approved equipment and approved calibration that we can kind of send around to different parts. Then we can reach a point of actually doing proper registration through your testing cannabinoids and having a specific like that. But up until the point that we get to that testing, I think we will probably rely on, a form coming from SAPRA. Sorry, there's been noise there. Up until there, I think we will have to rely on doing, multiple grows, making sure the plants are stabilized, making sure the phenotype looks correct, like I said, your weight, your look, your coloration. And then I do think they will maybe you can send it for testing, and they'll allow for some variation, like a 2% up or 2% down.
Okay. Jordan, is biopiracy then a real threat if there's no regulatory framework with which to register SA genetics overseas? I mean, I hear where everyone's coming from, but it's not as if there's one bank where everyone's just going to quickly register all our land races.
So the biggest concern, firstly, is the crossing of our land races and actually losing them. So this is another topic I love talking about, is land races today compared to land races 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago. I've been to a number of farms in Swaziland and KwaZulu-Natal where you can go there, and every 5 years to 6 years, you see that same land race strain come back, where it dominates, and it's the phenotype. One phenotype dominates a full region. But with that, it still is, over time, we're still seeing the plant get, what I like to say, stronger. With evolution, I believe everything kind of has to grow and adapt. And, with the new climates and the new weather, temperature, and everything going on in the world, I feel that even our landrace strains they've started adapting to it. So a lot of guys have come and said that, and this leads me back to where I started, we worry because you get your Europeans, Americans who come down to Swaziland and, well, let's just our rural areas where they're growing our landrace strains, and they don't only take the seeds back, but they bring seeds here. And then they leave a whole bunch of European or foreign genetics that these guys then grow, and that pollinates the crops. And for a while, you lose your landrace strains. You see for like 3, 4, 5 years, you get these mixed strains popping up all over. But I have seen over time, the landrace strains do kind of always come back. So I'm never worried that we're going to lose them completely, but I have definitely seen adjustments to the strains. And I have seen good ones, it goes through like 5 years, or 3 to 5 years where you see these bad phenotypes popping up, and then you just see these beautiful landrace strains coming up again with just a little bit more oomph and power behind them. But yeah, I do believe there's a little bit of a worry in the sense that our genetics are already overseas. So, yes, there's no actual process exactly to register medicinal cannabis and that, but there are private companies that have, have put their own processes together where you can send your genetics and your research and everything to register it. So there is that of who will be the first private or governing body that will be backed, that people will start trusting to purchase their genetics and seeds from. So I do believe it comes more down to that, in the world we at today. I think it's got a lot more to do with just, anyone bringing out a process and saying, okay, let's register genetics. It's if we do get the right process there and we get the right people backing that company, I think, you know, we will have multiple companies around the world who you can kind of go to and register your genetics. There are a number of things that do go along with it. You know, you should have a foreign seed bank, or it's a third-party bank that holds your tissue culture. So if you've created a genetic, you would, you know, cut off some tissue culture, you can send it to the third-party facility who will hold it. They can then create an orange certificate stating that, you know, they hold your genetics there, and if anyone wants to check that, you know, that they've got, if we find someone else growing our strains and we have registered it, we can then take a cutting of it, send it to that third party, and they can test it to our tissue culture they've been storing. So I mean, there are these different facilities that will need to be set up, you know, along the way to actually register these genetics properly. We do have facilities right now that offer the orange certificates for other, you know, for other varieties, but as it stands, you can't get that for cannabis.
Orange certificate.
Yeah.
Okay. Jordan, how many land races do you think there could be in South Africa? I mean, it might sound a silly question, but it's one that's asked all the time.
Sure.
Anybody's guess?
So like, I'd say about 5 to 7. I have also seen more what I would call landrace strains popping up. Like I said, they are guys. I have had a few guys who argue with me and say, no, landrace strain is a landrace strain. You know, the Durban poison, Swazi gold. But I mean, even if we take like Swaziland, for example, if you go to the northern region, middle region, or the southern region, you see 3 different phenotypes of what I call Swazi gold. You know, their landrace strain. Because you do see then that they will dominate the whole area. If you try to introduce another strain in there, very quickly that strain falls away, and the characteristics of that landrace strain comes up of the second or third generation. And from the guys I've spoken to in these areas, they have said that, you know, there used to be like 1 phenotype that was there. Then they've seen like 2 phenotypes and 3, and that to me is just pure. You know, the plant is adapting. You know, it's learning. There's new environments. There's new weather patterns it has to deal with, and you know, we're going on to today. In what I'm throwing out a number, but let's just say Swazi gold in Swaziland is probably at a 2000th generation that's come out. You know, so and that's in self-breeding itself. You know, and that's just nature and how it works. Yeah.
That's an interesting thing that you've just said, because in most people's minds, Swazi gold would be a landrace, but what you're saying is actually there might be about 4 or 5 different phenotypes which all are being claimed to be Swazi gold, but somewhere in that the phenotypes that 4 or 5 to 7 major land races wouldn't necessarily go under those names. I mean, they'd be, you know, whatever, Ponderland 1 or something like that.
Exactly right. The one thing though you can see is there's definitely massive similarities in the plants. You know, where in the phenotype of how they look, there are these massive similarities throughout the whole Swaziland, how it grows. When you're curing the bud, the flowering time, like you have the similarities that you definitely can't ignore, that leads you to think, yes, this is also Swazi gold. But if you look closer into the plant and you start actually taking it into, now we do geno testing, and we actually break down the cannabinoids of it, and then you can kind of see there is a difference in some of the phenotypes there. But Joe, it's I still just think it's the plant adapting and growing, and then you do see every 5 years, 6 years where the fields are just dominated and it's just one strain. Yeah.
And when you talk about those, say, 5 to 7 land races, what do you call them?
I mean, we use your commercial names. You know, we've got your Durban Poison, your Swazi Gold, we've got Rooibos, we got KwaZulu, Power Plant. Yeah, then we also have, I mean, not African, but we have Hindu Kush, which is it's a landrace strain also.
A South African landrace strain?
No, it's from India, or the Himalayas.
Okay, so just in terms of South African land races, I was just looking at.
Yeah, no, it's just those. It was just those that we. But we are as we. Sorry, Brett. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to say, have you heard of? I just looking for the notes that I made when Ark was speaking. They're talking about some tsunami X strains, which are below 24% THC, to what they call the Emampondweni varieties, which are above 25%. Does that ring any bell with you?
Not exactly. I mean, you know, a lot of times I've spoken to the guys in Parliament, and that they do come a lot to. They talk about Pundo land, the growers coming out there, the product coming out of there. But when they come out with these percentages, it's to me it's thumbsucks right now until you actually get the product to send it to facilities that we can actually get some testing. And what I like to do is, you don't send one. If I have a flower, we tell licensed guys, from one plant, send 5 samples to the guys. If you're getting a massive average, we need to talk to the testers. If you're getting a small, difference between the tests, then you work on that average. But yeah, I mean, 25%. I haven't seen the test myself, so I wouldn't be able to let you know. I have seen product come out of South Africa that is testing at 26-28%. I have seen some test results also coming through 34-35%, but I just don't believe those results, to be honest. I don't believe
the Durban poison strains. They're saying it's over 30.
No. The Durban poison strain comes in at 12-16%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would you say, in your experience, South Africa's highest THC varietal is? Consistently high.
On a landrace strain?
Yeah.
None of them really come above your 18. Durban poison, power plant, I would say, comes in the highest. It's also found in the KwaZulu-Natal region. Comes in around 18% THC. But yeah, they are. One thing I have found with our landrace strains are, if you have the time to breed with them, you can if you cross them with the right genetics, and then you reverse crossing or back crossing, you can bring these THC levels right up. We found ways to pull in the traits of the local landrace strains where they grow very well, and they can grow in vigorous areas, and they receptive to PM and mold and certain viruses, but we managed to keep the THC and the look and the density of the American strains. It takes a lot of time, but you can do that, and I mean, that's what we've been working on, and we found it is. You get some amazing results out of crossing cannabis genetics with overseas genetics with the local African landrace strains.
And that's a different thing from cross-contamination, because that's genetic engineering. I mean, you're trying to create something. How does that work? Because it's not, as you said earlier, it's not like you're dealing with one thing, like a kilogram will always weigh a kilogram, whatever year it occurs in. But you're saying plants are adaptable to their environment, they're changing all the time. So the whole concept of landrace purity, it's much more of a living thing than something that you just said that can never be adaptable. Am I right?
Yeah. So I mean, I've heard there's some strain hunters that I know very well that. They've told us stories where they found in certain parts of Africa valleys where because of the wind structure and how the valley sits, the pollen actually can't fall into the valley, so it just carries over it. And so a lot of the local tribes in the area actually use these valleys to do their own breeding, where they know that they're not getting cross contamination or pollination. But then, pollination it's a natural thing that occurs. So that leads me back to, you know, our landrace strains and how they've been adapting over time. Is they're crossing with each other, you know, and the strongest are surviving, and that's where we're seeing this little bit of adaptation. What we don't like is when guys bring foreign plants into the country and start planting them and then crossing. You know, that's the pollen we believe maybe from like Europe that's coming here can affect our plants. You know, if we have very much sativa plants growing in South Africa due to our climate. If we're getting plants that come we're making hybrids that turn our plants more into, like, let's say, an indica phenotype where it's very short and stubbery, we'll start seeing massive PM problems, as well as probably a lot of other issues that will follow along. But we are also lucky enough that I've seen that our landrace strains are strong enough that when we are seeing this cross-pollination going on that shouldn't, our landrace strains are strong enough that over the time we do see them fight back, and you do see that same strain that you saw 5 or 7 years ago.
Amazing thing.
So nature crosses, you know, that pollinates by itself, and it knows how to do better than anyone else. We have been doing it ourselves, and we do it indoors. When we do our breeding, it takes a lot longer. You know, we do a lot of pheno hunting, where we grow out 500-600 seeds at a time, where we're looking, you know, for the best looking plants in there that we can pull out and start, you know, mothering those, taking clones of those, flowering those out. It's a long, tedious process, but I mean, when you get this beautiful looking plant at the end of it, it's quite amazing. And what we have done, I mean, in the past, and I'm not talking about just green smoke, and what the breeders around the world have done in the last 10 years. I mean, we've taken cannabis at 10 years ago, your highest strain was probably sitting at 16-17%, and we are producing stuff now that's in, you know, the early 30s to 35%.
So where are you based now? In Joburg?
Yeah, so I'm based in Johannesburg. You know, before COVID, a lot of traveling between here, Amsterdam, Barcelona, America. But yeah, based in Johannesburg. I've always loved South Africa, so definitely want to keep pushing, you know, pushing what we can do in South Africa and growing green smoke room here.
Do you feel fairly encouraged by where this whole cannabis legalization reform movement is going, or do you feel like it's got the potential to backfire quite badly? So
on the seed perspective, I just think things are going way too slow. I mean, I've said it from day one that from the Constitutional Court ruling in 2018, when you know, the judge said you're allowed to grow at home, it doesn't make sense to me that the definition of cannabis wasn't changed. It doesn't make sense that you are allowed to grow at home, but you can't get seeds. You know, it's the government has made a law that you cannot fulfill the law. It doesn't make sense at all, and unless they expect you to, you know, happen to find some cannabis seeds on the ground, which I don't know how they would expect that. You know, and also you could also think maybe they expect you to purchase from overseas, from another country in the meantime, but to bring them into this country without postal service and everything, I mean, that's another whole issue in itself. And then you would kind of hope that the government would want to increase the local market, you know, and the quickest way to do that right now is to allow for the sale of seeds. You know, the government is pushing for this, they like the Privacy Act. You can smoke and grow in your own home, but you can't purchase. So we're going, okay, if you don't want anyone to purchase stuff and you want them to grow it, how do you expect them to grow it if you can't grow the seed? You know, you can't purchase the seed. You can't even, as only a grow shop, you can't advertise your grow equipment as cannabis grow equipment. You know, like the law is legally can grow at home, but me as a shop owner, I can't advertise that I sell cannabis grow equipment. Like, to me, that's just backwards. And that's where I don't understand. And I do feel that our government got very much caught up in a wave of two things at once, where there was this Concord ruling that allowed for the privacy and the recreational use of cannabis at home. And then at the exact same time, we had the push for the push for medicinal cannabis and SAPRA handing out licenses. And I think there was this massive confusion on, okay, what departments are now handling what with cannabis? You know, with SAPRA going out and giving licenses, and even their licenses haven't ticked all the boxes when it comes to legally importing and exporting of cannabis and seeds. And, you know, and one big thing I've seen with all the license holders is we've delivered seeds to quite a few guys. And all these guys get this license, and in this license it says you're allowed to import cannabis seeds, but guys then go and get the import permit, and when they apply to import seeds, the medicinal cannabis seeds, there's no tariff code for it. So you have to go and register, bring them in as hemp seeds. So I mean, like there's things like this where, to me, it's just departments aren't talking to each other. Very simple things that if they literally had to just, I mean, if they had to not sit down with 65 people or 100 people, and they had one-on-one conversations with a few of the license holders, they could very easily see the areas that need to be fixed. But the SAPRA and the Parliament Committee and and DORAD keep hosting, and DTR keep hosting these talks where they invite all the license holders, anyone who wants to apply for a license, and you have an hour where everyone speaks for 5 minutes and they say thank you very much, and nothing happens afterwards. You know, and then I talk to DORAD, and DORAD will say, no, we're waiting on SAPRA to, you know, change, or Justice to change the definition. And you speak to SAPRA, and SAPRA go, no, well, SARS need to add a tariff code. That's not our job. And it's just always pointing fingers and not actually even communicating to the guy saying, please, will you do this? Which I do have a little bit of confidence now in this Parliament Committee. After we had the second round, I enjoyed the feedback that the Parliament Committee gave, the questions they were asking. I just hope now they can actually continue and run with this, that it's not just another one of these meetings that we've had. I think we've had 3 or 4 of them over the past 2 years, and I've really seen nothing come from them. You know, I mean, even that first draft bill that came out, it's, you know, there's the draft bill and then the master plan, and the two didn't match up together. There was some, and then there's just some stuff in there that makes no sense. And like it's like they asked everyone for their comments and didn't read a single thing, and then created this draft bill.
I know, that's crazy. Sorry, Jordan, we've got very little time left. Just one quick thing I want to ask you. And I mean, I'd see this as a series of conversations going forward, because it is an unfolding conversation. But for now, just what your view is on the whole hemp in the Eastern Cape, planting hemp there. Is that what you're talking about with the cross-pollination that will bring down our THC levels? Or do you think that's an overstated anxiety?
It's definitely not overstated. But it can be controlled. So, you know, as long as I think there's a good drive in the Eastern Cape for cannabis and hemp farming. Big farming community there. Hemp can actually really help the land there that has over time been destroyed from the type of agricultural farming that's gone on there. But it's going to have to be heavily watched. You know, the guys are going to have to be very responsible when they're growing. I hope guys will take, you know, at least precautions of having some shade cloth netting up, something like that that can reduce some of the pollination. And then more so, we're going to look at the actual license holders, breeders, and the other guys to look at their facilities and make sure they can't get cross-contamination. Now, if you're growing outdoors...
If we get cut off now, then don't hassle about reconnecting, but just carry on.
No worries. If we do get, when you're growing outdoors, anything in South Africa technically is considered open pollinated. You know, it means that we can't guarantee it hasn't been cross-contaminated, and that's we're talking chilies or anything. So you do look at the license holder or the breeder or whoever has their facility to make sure they've got a good greenhouse facility, or they've got a good indoor facility that they can make sure there's no cross-contamination going on.